Hey leaders, thanks so much for watching again. If you'll excuse my voice, I am still getting over from being sick, but we are in the final week of our Close series. It was just a 2-week series, but perfect fitting to start a new year and to come back from a wonderful winter retreat together, and just to remember how can we stay close with the God that has a great plan for us. So before we dive into that though, I want to just give you just some more pointers and some more tips as small group leaders. We've talked about some of this stuff before, but just want to reiterate it as we are in a brand new year. But we always want to keep in the forefront of our mind inviting our students to what's next, into the next phase of student ministry. And we've talked about the different levels of ministry that we provide as a ministry together. We have our foyer, and that's the very entry level beginning place for students to enter into our ministry together. And that's think about your house. That's the front door. That's where everybody comes through. You hang out, you have conversations at the front door, but inevitably you take another step and you move from an entry-level place like just a fun weekend event into the living room. And our living room environment is our Sunday night youth group or Bible study or something like that. That's a weekly program. And think about your living room. That's where you have some more life talks and you get a little bit deeper. And that's a great place where a lot of our students currently are. And then I want to challenge us, always be thinking about and noticing opportunities to invite students to the very next level, which is the kitchen. And think about your house again. Not everybody makes it all the way to the kitchen, but everybody in the kitchen at your house is normally a very close-knit group of people. They mean the most to you. You share life together. That's where all the good and deep stuff usually happens in a house, is sitting around a kitchen table. You cook together, you clean together. It's where everything kind of gets real. And so remember that as you're in ministry with students, how can you be looking for opportunities to invite them into the next level of ministry together, from the foyer to the living room to our kitchen events and going away on mission trips and camps. If you notice a student who's been in one of these spots for a while, encourage them to step into the next place. Maybe that means attending a mission trip or a service day or going to camp with us over the summer or other events. And maybe once they're in the kitchen, the next step would be, hey, invite your friends back into a foyer type environment. Bring them back in. The whole system goes full circle, but we want to continue to remind our students, take the next step. When you're comfortable in ministry here, stretch yourself a little bit, grow closer to God, take the next place, because that's what we're all about here in student ministry, is walking that journey alongside of our students. So I thank you for doing that already. I just want to constantly keep that in the back of our mind. But like I said, we're in week 3 of Close. Think about your friendships growing up. The chances are some of your childhood friends have grown apart, or you've drifted away from some of your friends over the years. Now the truth is, anytime someone takes it off in a different direction, it creates distance. And it's not always a bad thing, but it's reality. When we choose to chase after one thing, that almost always means we have put distance between us and someone or something else. And that is just as true as our relationship with God as well. Maybe you went to camp or a retreat and you felt super close to God. That's our hope and dream of what the winter retreat was for some of our students. Then you come home and things weren't exactly the same. Maybe you got distracted and begun to chase after something you knew wasn't a part of God's plan for you. Maybe it wasn't intentional, but your time and energy was focused somewhere on something else or something new. And then you feel it. You feel distance. There are a lot of things that distract us from God, though. Maybe it's a new friend or music you started listening to or a new hobby. But whatever the thing is that distracts us from that once close feeling with God, those things basically boil down to a single word. It's a word we don't talk about much in student ministry, but that word is sin. And maybe you hear the word sin and you think of all the big no-nos, murder, adultery, stealing, lying, but basically sin is anything that creates distance between God and you. And that distance makes us feel awkward in our relationship with God. We assume God's mad at us, so we stop talking to him. We skip church. We don't open the Bible. And in the process, we create more distance between us and God. And even though you may have heard a million times that God loves you no matter what, that Jesus died so you could be close to him, that nothing you do could ever separate you from God, maybe you just can't seem to shake the feeling that things aren't great between the two of you. Now the problem we have, and the problem with chasing after things other than God, is that it is not a new problem. In fact, the very first Christians had this very same issue. So I don't say that to make us feel guilty. I say that to be real. The Apostle Paul, the guy responsible for writing most of the New Testament, spent a great deal of time talking to the earliest churches about this very issue. One of these churches was in Rome. And when we read Paul's letter to the people there, we get the feeling the Roman church had the very same problem of getting distracted. They started to chase after things that were putting distance between them and God. And when they realized their sin, instead of admitting it, they tried to pass it off and blame other people, drawing attention to other people who had messed up more than they had. Why? Because it's more comfortable to point to other people and the things that they had done. Now maybe that's why Paul began chapter 2 of his letter to the Romans this way. He said, you may think you can condemn such people, but you're just as bad, and you have no excuse. And that's Romans chapter 2, verse 1. Pointing fingers is easy, but Paul knew that focusing on the sin of other people is just a way to avoid dealing with the sin in our own lives. But Paul didn't stop there. He went on to say something you probably didn't expect. He said, don't you see how wonderfully kind, tolerant, and patient God is with you? It's verse 4. Now I have to be honest, when I think God is kind, it's when I'm behaving well, or when I have a string of really good choices, or I've been nice to my parents, or I didn't gossip this week. Kind is not the word that I think describes God when I've made some really poor choices. It's easier to think of words like angry or disappointed, but right in the middle of a conversation about sin, Paul throws out words like kind, tolerant, patient. Words that describe the opposite how we think God feels towards us. Now remember we said a couple weeks ago that God wants to be close to you, period. He desires a relationship for you, and it doesn't hinge on what we've done. His love and kindness towards you is non-conditional. In fact, he loved you so much that he sent his son to die so that sin would never separate us from God again. If you feel like God's mad at you right now, you need to know that he loves you. And he has an amazing plan for your life that is beyond anything you can currently imagine. He isn't keeping score of all the ways you messed up. He wants the distance between you and him to go away. That's why God hates sin so much, because it keeps you from being as close as you could be. Because sin takes you in a direction that hurts you and pulls you away from God's plan for your life. The writer of the book of Hebrews puts it this way. He says, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. And let us run with endurance the race that God has set before us. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Sin doesn't keep God from loving us, and it doesn't keep his kindness from being towards us. But it does slow us down, and it does trip us up. Which is why Paul finishes the verse to the Romans the way he does. He says, don't you see how wonderfully kind, tolerant, and patient God is with you? Does this mean nothing? Can't you see that kindness is intended to turn you from your sin? Paul reminds us that if we've gotten distracted and we've begun chasing something that's not part of God's plan for us, the only thing we have to do is turn and go the other way. The point of God's kindness isn't just to make us feel better about our sin. Paul says God's kindness is intended to turn us from our sin. So what do we do from here? You pick what you pursue. Chances are you already have a list of things in your head that you are currently tempted to chase that ultimately put you distance between you and God. And for most of us, we don't think about pursuing those things. It just sort of happens. It's like a reflex or an instinct. But what would it look like for you to intentionally pick what you pursue? For some of us, the first step is to simply start talking to God again. Maybe you've tried to keep your distance because you were afraid of how God would respond. For others, you know that you and God are okay. You know that he feels kindness towards you, but you haven't let that kindness lead to change. You still need to turn from some things that are distracting you. Maybe that means thinking about what you say before it leaves your mouth, or spending time with different people. Here's the thing. Saying yes to God may mean saying no to things that pull you away. You got to pick what you pursue. Even if there's nothing distracting you right now, even if you or God are as close as you've ever been, there will come a day when you see something that you're tempted to pursue instead of God. Remember, you have the option to decide who or what you chase. You get to pick what you pursue. And as you head out this week, I want you to know something. Every person in this room and every person you've ever met has sinned. We all have walked away from God in an effort to chase something else, but walking away doesn't mean you keep your distance. God, in his kindness, is inviting you to come closer to him, to walk with him, to turn away from the things that will trip you up. I think you'll find that what you experience when you stick close to God is better than anything that would have happened if you walked away. So this week, we'll see you at 3:45 for our small group leader meeting on Sunday night. We'll have our 5th graders here from Link, so we'll have a really great time with them. They'll be doing some of the things with the middle schoolers, but not everything quite yet. So have a great rest of your week. We'll see you at 4:45. Thanks for everything you do, leaders. Bye, guys.